You probably don't know that Angola has quietly become one of the most strategically important countries in Africa in just the last few years. In fact, Angola is a military and economic powerhouse today, and this has only been possible because it's been relatively stable compared to its neighbors like the DRC, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. So, what happened to put Angola in this position, and what impact does this have on geopolitics? Before 2017, Angola was ruled by José Eduardo dos Santos for 38 years. Under dos Santos, the country's entire existence was dictated by oil and defined by kleptocracy and nepotism. He appointed his daughter as head of the state oil company and his son as chairman of the $5 billion sovereign wealth fund. But in 2017, dos Santos handpicked his defense minister, João Lourenço, to be his successor, and he stepped down. Few expected meaningful change, but within 2 months of taking office, Lourenço fired dos Santos' children and replaced over 60 senior officials linked to dos Santos, launching prosecutions against many of them. In January 2020, over 715,000 documents were leaked, and the subsequent investigation revealed that dos Santos and his children had built a sprawling network of companies, relationships, and operations designed to enable money laundering and embezzlement. Angola's anti-corruption effort recovered billions of dollars in misappropriated state assets. Angola produces over 1 million barrels of crude oil every day, making it sub-Saharan Africa's second largest producer after Nigeria. And though this number has declined by roughly 50% since 2008, oil accounts for roughly 75% of government revenues, 95% of exports, and 29% of the country's total GDP. In 2024, after OPEC slashed Angola's oil quota by roughly a quarter, Angola pulled out of the organization, freeing it to pursue independent production strategies. The government also attracted major new investment by changing their royalty and profit-sharing arrangements. Angola's mining industry is also substantial. In 2024, Angola surpassed Botswana as Africa's top producer of diamonds. But beyond that, the country also holds 36 of the 51 minerals deemed critical for the global transition to renewable energy, including cobalt, copper, lithium, and rare earths. Most of these resources remain uncommercialized, but this will likely change in the coming years. Meanwhile, to facilitate its continued growth, Angola has taken on tens of billions of dollars in loans from China. In fact, roughly 27% of all Chinese investment in Africa has gone to Angola, and these oil-backed loans have funded railways, roads, housing, and Luanda's new international airport. Debt repayments consume a substantial share of the national budget, but Angola is aggressively paying them off and has indicated that not only will they move away from oil-backed loans, but they intend to shift toward a more collaborative model with China on mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. Angola has also been incredibly pragmatic since Lourenço took office, diversifying its interests and keeping relationships with global superpowers largely transactional. Today, each global power fills a very distinct functional role. China provides infrastructure financing. The EU offers regulatory credibility and eco-friendly technology. The US delivers security partnerships and diplomacy on minerals. The Gulf states bring money and logistical capability, and India supports defense modernization. China and the US have directly competed for investment opportunities, and Angola has repeatedly played them against each other to advance its own interests. But it's also established defense partnerships with India, the UAE, and Russia, demonstrating very deliberate non-alignment. Angola's military underpins all of this. The Angolan armed forces number over 100,000 active personnel, equipped with Russian Su-27 and Su-30 fighter aircraft and T-72 tanks. Beyond their equipment, the military has a proven history of success, battle-tested throughout the Angolan Civil War and regional interventions in the last several decades. So how has Angola managed to stay so stable compared to its neighbors? Mozambique, for example, is also governed by a liberation-era ruling party, but its disputed election in 2024 triggered nationwide violence that killed about 400 demonstrators and cost 2% of the country's GDP in just 10 days. Angola's 2022 election was the closest in the country's history, but it didn't devolve into violence like that. There are several structural factors that contribute to Angola's stability. Oil wealth gives the government the resources to fund the military and maintain patronage networks and deliver enough infrastructure to sustain legitimacy. Secondly, the same party, the MPLA, has maintained total institutional control since 1975, which means the playing field is so tilted that a legal opposition victory is effectively impossible. Angola's professional and well funded military is also deeply embedded with the MPLA's party structure, and unlike countries like the DRC or CAR, military elites benefit directly and have no incentive to stage a coup. Finally, when the country's civil war ended in 2002 after 27 years, the opposition party completely transformed into a purely political faction, and all parties involved were tired of war. Still, stability is not the same as prosperity. Nearly half of Angolans live below the poverty line, youth unemployment stands at about 58%, and the richest 20% receive 59% of all income. The government remains systemically corrupt, and the media is largely dictated by them. The country's stability is more fragile than it seems. In July 2025, a 33% hike in diesel fuel prices triggered Angola's deadliest civil unrest since the Civil War, with dozens killed and many shops looted, including nearly 100 Chinese-owned businesses in Luanda, reflecting deep resentment toward Chinese commercial interests. Thousands of Chinese nationals fled the country. Angola's post-Civil War generation, those born after 2002, are now voting age. In 2022, they drove the opposition's greatest surge since the war ended. With a huge reliance on oil revenues and a population seeking change, the ruling party will have to adapt if it wants to maintain the country's stability.